Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Fire Breathing Rob. Please like and subscribe to our videos on YouTube. And if you're listening on another platform, definitely share these interviews. They're with impressive people from all over the country. So thank you for that. I have another returning guest, and this is Rachel Ventura. She was on before, and she was a candidate for Congress. And she is also holding elective office right now. And we're going to go into that in a minute. So, Rachel, thanks so much for coming on. We greatly appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks for having me back on.
Your primary, I think, was March 17th, correct?
Yes.
With that said, the pandemic was starting to just come on right now. We saw that the numbers after that March 17th primary, which was, your race was, but also the presidential primary was during that time for Senator Sanders and also Vice President Biden. All these people went out and vote. And a lot of those people did get coronavirus, and, some died and some got extremely sick. With your race, do you feel like that affected the turnout because there was a lot of people that were nervous and may not have voted? I know that a lot of people did do mail-in, but, they heard these scary scenarios and they didn't go out and vote.
Yeah, it definitely affected turnout. And, historically, you can look at the numbers. I think it was about 20% less than usual. I myself got coronavirus after the election. Some of my staff members, I've heard that election judges also got sick. Now, they shut our state down just after the election. So some people argued perhaps it should have been shut down beforehand. I know Ohio ended up pushing their elections back. Illinois did not. I don't know if that was the right call or not. After they did shut down the state, we really went hard against making sure that people were social distancing, wearing masks, staying at home. And I think that really helped Illinois flatten the curve. So now we are in phase 4, where it's a little bit more lenient. You can have up to 50 people in an inside building, but we're starting to see some of our rates go back up. And so I think the governor's got to make a hard decision again on whether or not to roll back, or just people maybe need to be more prudent in their choices. But we were getting information on the campaign a little bit before the election about the dangers of COVID. I mean, everybody kind of was about that time. And so we started wearing masks and gloves. Now it was still a little bit cold here, so some people were still wearing scarves, and I think that helped us stay safe. There was only a few people who got sick, and honestly, I think it's because we worked the day of the polls and that early election that weekend, the get out the vote weekend. And, not everyone was wearing masks at that point. We tried our best to make sure that we were not spreading any illnesses. Like I said, we wore masks and gloves, but it's entirely possible that we had already been infected before we even got the information, because we were out there knocking so many doors. And so I don't want to put fault on anyone. And, once we did get sick, we quarantined and we tried not to spread anything. But it affected the election. But I want to also make one other point. Yeah. That Super Tuesday, I think, affected the election more than anything else. The candidates who pulled out right before Super Tuesday so that Biden could get a higher bump, we felt that at the doors. Right after Super Tuesday, when we were knocking doors, people were telling us, well, I was a Bernie supporter, but it's clear that Biden's going to win, so we're just going to switch our vote. And so we were like, no, please don't do that, but that's the feeling that we have, is that, they had to go through those lengths just to make sure that Bernie didn't win the election. And had Bernie taken Illinois and then shortly after that Wisconsin, then I think we'd be looking at a very different delegate right now. And so I think it wasn't just COVID that affected our election, but the Democratic Party really did not allow the people to have that voice by playing the games they did.
In general, you did have coronavirus, which I just found out. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so GOTV, the Friday before the election, I started getting a headache and fatigue. But of course, as a candidate, you're highly stressed, not sleeping well anyway. But at that point, I kind of started taking more precautions. Like I said, everyone started wearing masks and gloves because I wasn't sure if I was getting sick or not. I did not get sick until after. So the election was Tuesday the 17th. It was sometime later that next weekend that I started kind of feeling under the weather, getting a little bit of scratchiness in my throat. By that following Tuesday, though, or not even that Monday, I called my doctor and I said, okay, okay, I definitely think I'm having a hard time breathing. It's not normal. I mean, I could lay down in my bed, be completely still, and it felt like I had just run up a flight of stairs and come back, you know, that windedness. So I was like, this is
Yeah.
definitely not normal. At that point, we did not have tests available in Illinois. They only had emergency tests for, I think, first responders. And so there wasn't even a test my doctor could administer at that point. You know, she did ask other defining questions, like, was this a panic attack or could have been something else? So we went through all of that. And then, you know, she basically was like, if it gets worse, let me know. At that point, you know, I started trying to do everything to improve my immune system, everything from a humidifier with essential oils, zinc, vitamin C, even garlic, onions, you know, all the old wives' tales, soup, everything, to try and get better, because it was a little scary. For about 3 days, there was, you know, a very heaviness in my chest and difficulty breathing. And then I started getting better. During that time, I did quarantine myself, so away from my children. And that was hard. You know, we put a little TV tray outside my door, and they would go and put food there for me, and then I'd wait for them to leave, and then I would open the door up and bring it in. Now, my mother did get sick as well, but she was an election judge. So that might have been one reason as well. So she had to quarantine. Now, my father didn't get it and my kids didn't seem to get it. So I guess our efforts paid off. But I will tell you, losing an election and quarantining yourself from your family is probably the most depressing thing I've ever had to do. I definitely had the loss of sense and smell, which is kind of the thing that was the sure thing then, because like I said, there wasn't a test available. And by the time the tests were actually available to the mass public, I was already several weeks better at that point. But it took me a good probably 2 or 3 weeks to get my smell back completely. And it was really weird when it came back. It would only come back for like a short, very brief period of time. Like, did I smell something? And then it would kind of go away. And then I would come back for a little bit longer. And then finally I was like, okay, I think I can just smell normally again. So that was something that was definitely one of the signs. And then I did end up getting kind of like hives or a rash, and which turned into bruises. But I guess the COVID is part of like a red blood cell. I mean, it attaches to the red blood cells. So that could be why I was getting bruises. But then my doctor just took a bunch of extra tests to make sure nothing came out definitive. I didn't have anything else going on. So it's one of those, well, we guess it was COVID related.
Now, in your county, which you serve on the county council, correct, with Will County, what are they doing right now as an elected official yourself? What are you guys doing to, you know, try to keep the county safe? I remember last time we spoke, when you were running, you were speaking about, you know, all the pollution in that area. You spoke about how tough it is to breathe in general. We think when we hear about this pollution, we think about people having asthma in general.
Yeah, so all of a sudden when COVID hit, there was basically a microscope on our health department. What is our health department doing? What is, we have a board of health that dictates that. So all of a sudden it was, you know, what's happening? And I think that was very stressful for our health department. We also do have a nursing home that the county runs. You know, they were very proactive, especially since some of the private nursing homes were getting cases by the dozens, you know, one, I think as many as 70 cases. And so I do give kudos to our nursing home. They really stepped up, made sure they had the PPEs, they were doing testing. If anyone got sick, they quarantined them. So we've been very lucky in that regard. Our health department was a little slow going at first. Even just getting information out was troublesome because we didn't have it set up to do daily briefs or anything like that. So even getting to that point took a little bit of time. Since then, we've really evaluated our policies there. We've talked with the Board of Health on how to move forward, you know, making sure that what we are doing is proactive. We're doing a lot of contract tracing now. We did apply for several grants and we're awarded something like $3 million for contract tracing for education, making sure people understand that COVID, you know, what it is, wear a mask. So we have been very proactive in trying to get that information out. As for some of the pollution, I am happy that I've been, I was added to a committee to help us with a natural gas plant. So we are converting our waste plant over to a natural gas plant. And the company that we've chosen to sell off our gas, they are going to be selling it to some of these electric trucks. And so then the gas is going to be sold right here in Will County to some of the trucks. And we have the largest inland port in North America, possibly the world. And so we have a lot of truck traffic going through here. So really the next step is to push heavily for public transportation like buses and our trucks to move to electric vehicles or some type of natural gas so that we can get them off of the diesel pollution that we have going through our county.
How is the mask wearing over in Will County? Is it, is people taking it pretty seriously then?
Yeah, I mean, by now it's pretty normalized. It's kind of a rare thing to see someone without a mask in public. And I think everyone just kind of looks at them like, what are you doing, In the beginning, it was hit or miss. I remember, those first few weeks after I was done quarantining, like many others, I decided to do a home remodeling project. And we did the ceiling of my bathroom. And so I went to Menards, and the workers weren't wearing a mask or gloves or anything. I thought, you guys sell these masks, on the shelves. What are you doing? But within 3 weeks, then, they had even implemented not just masks, but they had those plexiglass in front of the registers and stuff. So we moved, I think, somewhat quickly, but should we have moved quicker? Absolutely. And I do think that is a failure of our federal government that, Fauci was out there saying that we needed to have masks. And then they basically admitted that they lied to us because they didn't have the mask supply and they didn't want people to run out like they did with toilet paper and buy up all the masks. And so should we have been telling people from day one to wear masks? Absolutely. We could have done so much more to protect the people. And Congress still could be doing things like making sure that we're extending the unemployment, that evictions are not happening, even whether it's a UBI or some other type of tax dollars that's going into our communities to make sure that we are safeguarding our jobs. Now is the perfect time to transition to green energy jobs that pay a living wage. We're going to have so many people out of work. I mean, at one point it was 22% unemployment here in Will County. I think it's dropped down to 15%, which is a little bit better. But by the end of the month, when they lift the eviction notice, how many people are going to lose their homes? If they don't have jobs or insurance, now is the time to push for Medicare for all, and yet Biden stays silent on these things. This is a problem. And we, as the American people, there's a lot of unrest between Black Lives Matter, between COVID. We recently had our nurses on strike. During a pandemic, our nurses were striking because the hospital didn't want to even give them the same contract they had in the past. I mean, this is a problem, but we need to take all of this unsettling energy, and instead of getting rooted back in the old ways, the racist, sexist, corrupt ways, we need to move collectively forward to something better that's going to help the people. And that helps that starts by having everybody hold their elected officials accountable. And that also means not promising your vote just because Biden is better than Trump. You need to tell Biden, I will vote for you if you pass Medicare for all. I will vote for you if you put dollars back in our community. If you promise to get us out of these wars and stop spending trillions of dollars on the military industrial complex and instead put it in our communities, in police reform, in good paying jobs, in fighting the climate. And if they can't do that, then they didn't win because they weren't the right candidate. And that's what the American people need to say instead of, well, he's better than Trump and we can't have Trump in office anymore. No, we can do so much better as American people.
So what do you think of Pritzker's job in Illinois?
Yeah, so during the primary, Pritzker wasn't my first choice. I wanted someone a little bit more progressive, but I'll tell you, I have been pleasantly surprised. We legalized marijuana here. There is money that is being set aside for reparations, and we continue to fight for that in the county board as well, where those dollars are going to go to make sure that they are impacting communities who have been affected by it before or in the past. He did pass $15 minimum wage, although it's not going to set for several years. They're doing a roll up, but it is something. We are moving in the right direction. He is trying to get a progressive tax passed it's on a referendum. So again, kind of surprised on that. I think that it could have had a little bit more of a decrease on the lower end and a higher percentage on the higher end, but this is the first step towards moving away from a flat tax. And so whether that passes or not, I'm not sure, but there are some things that have been interesting on how he has approached the debt that previous administrations, not just Ronner, but previous administrations had stole from different areas, like our transportation fund, for example, and that was didn't have the money in it. Our pension system, that doesn't have the money it needs in it. And so now safeguarding some of those funds and making sure we put the dollars back in is super important. Marijuana was definitely part of funding that. Same with the progressive tax. He opened up gambling. I don't always think that gambling is the best way to go. It does sometimes, or more than likely, impact impact the working class and the working poor more so than anyone else. And so it is kind of a little bit of a regressive tax there, but ultimately it is a user tax. The state did pass a gas tax, which was very controversial. Even on the county board, I voted no. I was the only Democrat who voted no to the gas tax. You know, I really think that we need to be moving into renewable energy. So I suppose the gas tax is a detriment to people driving cars, okay. But again, I think it kind of hits the poor. But I feel like there's a balance here of what he's doing. As far as COVID, maybe he should have acted quicker and shut down the elections. I don't know if there was politics to play there or not. I guess you'd have to be in the room when that was decided to know that for sure. But when we did shut down the state, he was very clear about staying indoors, you know, quarantining at home as much as you can, wearing masks when you're out and about. I think we did a good job of flattening the curve. He took a lot of heat. I know even the Republicans on our county board wanted to send a letter telling Pritzker to, you know, open up different districts and allow the economy to do well. You know, we fought that and said that's just ridiculous. If people don't have money to spend, they're not going to be out there spending it. So you're just going to doom these businesses, forcing them to open when no one's going to shop at them. So I think that, you know, he took on those fights. He even took on Trump in some of those fights too. And, you know, Trump threatened to keep Illinois from getting the supplies they needed. You know, now Trump is talking about bringing in the National Guard or whoever these federal agents are to Chicago. But I do think that Pritzker has tried hard to do what is best, by and large, for the masses. It cannot be an easy job, so I will give him credit where credit is due. And but rest assured, if he does something wrong, I'll be the first person to call it out too.
Meet St. Joe's Hospital, is that how you say it?
Yeah, so they were on strike for 17, 18 days, and they just recently approved a contract. You know, it was a controversial contract. There was one they had offered a little bit beforehand, and they would not put a no retaliation clause in there. And so the nurses were very afraid that if they would have accepted that contract, which they were asking for safer staffing levels. So that contract did have increase the number of staff, but it didn't have that retaliation clause. And they were afraid that if they went back, that those nurses would be fired. There's about 700 nurses. There were 47 who crossed the picket line, but the rest of the nurses held strong. Now they wanted 60 additional staff brought on, because not just because of COVID, but because they were under the limit that Illinois has set for safe staffing. It would cost AMITA $6 million a year to have that done. Instead, the hospital paid $5 million in 1 week to bring on temp nurses, paid their hotel costs, paid them $65 an hour. Our nurses don't even make $65 an hour, just so they could, I guess, you know, make a point or break the union. In the end, the contract that they ended up approving it didn't have the safe staffing levels they wanted. Instead, they allowed them to use nurses on call to further those jobs. If you needed more nurses, you could use someone on call, so that they could increase those numbers, but not actually hire more nurses. But they did put the retaliation clause in there. I think many of the nurses were conflicted about it. They felt like AMITA would have stayed out and broke the union if they had not ratified this contract. AMITA talked about how they could go 8 months without turning any profit and they would be fine. So here they are putting millions of dollars into temp agency nurses instead of paying their own nurses, who once again worked during COVID. They had PPEs that they had to put inside a plastic or inside of a paper bag, put in a closet. I mean, they wouldn't even give them new PPEs until, you know, basically the elastic was coming off, and, you know, not having the protective gear that you needed. And so I find it shameful. And at the end of the day, the nurses felt like, well, they wanted more staffing. They're going to allow for more staffing to be in the room when needed, but it's not really hiring more nurses, which is really what they need to do. Because if you're on call and then you got to go back to your regular work, now you're just going to be more exhausted. So at the end of the day, it does not solve that problem. So I think it's pretty shameful what AMITA has done. I know the nurses are going to continue to organize. They're going to build up their strike funds so that in 3 years, when negotiations are back on the table, that they can come back and say, no, we need to demand this. That's right. Well, and some of the nurses talked about the fact that, you know, some of them are going to have PTSD. I mean, the stuff that they've seen and gone through, you know, it's something that it's like a war zone almost. You know, and I think the other thing about this is that, like you said, the teachers and the nurses, the frontline workers, they're not essential until they're essential, right? We don't want to pay them a living wage. We want to pretend that this is all about, minimum wage is all about people flipping burgers or something. No, the reality is that when your burger flipper gets paid $15 an hour, your nurse probably gets paid $25, $30. Your teachers probably make more than that. I know when I substituted out in Washington State, I made $17 as a substitute teacher. And it's like, should our teachers be getting paid more than slightly over minimum wage? Heck yeah, and so we're seeing exactly how important they are to our community, to our future generations, and yet we still have this stigma of, we're not going to pay them. But bankers and, the fossil fuel industry and the food industry, even from a corporate standpoint, are bringing in billions of dollars, and yet, we can't get our community, people in our community, to have a living wage enough to, even pay their mortgage and stuff.
Are you going to send your kids back to school? Are you worried about that?
Yeah, I'm pretty worried about that. I have submitted stuff to our school board, ideas and whatnot, because I am concerned. I probably will not let my children take the bus. Now, they're only going one day a week, and I've been a little torn on this. I'm watching the cases carefully. Now, my children know they have to wear a mask everywhere. Like, we're very used to that now. They have several masks and different, patterns and colors. So they're kind of excited about matching their mask. And I think that's part of what we have to do. I know the schools are going to try and sanitize everything. So they're going into 7th grade. I have twins. And so they have all the 7th graders are going on Tuesday or Thursday. So they're splitting them in half. The 6th graders go on a different day. The 8th graders go on a different day. So the thought process is to try and do social distancing as best as possible. When they're not in school on that in-person day, they will be doing remote learning. My biggest concern, and this is what I sent to the school board, is in the spring, the remote learning, it basically was they got a packet, they read the packet, filled out a worksheet. It was horrible. I mean, my kids didn't want to do it. I just sit there and micromanage them, and I'm not that type of parent, so it was very stressful for me. And so that didn't work very well. And so that's been my biggest concern, is that they need to run a classroom, whether it's through Zoom or YouTube or whatever. Like, I'll ask them, like, this is lesson A, tomorrow will be lesson B, etc. And then when they're in person, they can get maybe a little bit more hands-on text, working with different things with their hands and make it more unique. But the thing of it that I noticed is that, my kids are missing human interaction. And that's such a vital part of children's learning and development, especially in junior high, where really you're just getting through the life of being bullied. I feel like, I mean, not to say you don't learn things in junior high, but there's a social element that you learn in those years. So I am torn on it. I mean, I feel like our schools are trying to do the best they can and really protect the kids. So I'm going to probably start off, unless cases get worse here. Like I said, we had been flattening the curve and our cases had been kind of low. They're a little bit on the uprise right now. So if in a month from now they're, a lot higher, then no, I'll wait to send my kids back. But otherwise, I think we're going to try to do the one day a week, and so that they can see their friends and interact with people. And, this might be our new reality. So how do we adapt to it that we are safe and we're keeping our children safe?
Got to get that vaccine faster. Can you speak to these people that don't believe in wearing masks?
Yeah, I'll start off by saying that, this shouldn't be political. Our health should not be political, whether it's Medicare for all, or whether it's wearing a mask, or even climate change. The pollution and stuff, it affects our life. It affects the quality of life. That shouldn't be something political. We should all want the best for our health. And so I would start there with saying, do you want the best for your health? Because whether or not you believe these things exist or not, you want to make sure you safeguard yourself in case they do, right? So I truly believe, yes, COVID is a thing. I believe that climate change is a thing. These are affecting our lives, and it is better for us to accept the scientific facts and deal with them. From a number standpoint, in Will County, we've had over 7,000 cases. We've had over 350 deaths. And yes, we did have a young 9 or 10-year-old who died. We've had multiple 20, 30, 40-year-olds who have died. This is not just killing the old people off. You know, I see funeral processions down our roads on a daily basis. This is happening. If you reach out on your social media and just post a question, can you tell me someone you know who has contracted COVID or someone you know who has died from COVID? I guarantee you, you're going to get a response. I personally know people who have died from COVID. I had COVID. I know people who have had COVID. It's scary. It is. It really is scary. Even I have a healthy immune system, and I laid in bed for 3 days thinking, oh my God, what if this is it? And I don't see my kids again. So it's very real, and people need to think, how do they want to be treated? If you had an illness that could spread to anyone and you couldn't see it, do you want someone coming around you and giving you that illness? Do you want to risk your family members? When you consider taking your kids to school in the fall or not taking them to school in the fall, you know, have a conversation with them and say, you need to wear your mask. You need to wear your mask at all times. It protects you. It protects them, because nobody wants to bury their kid because they made the wrong assumption, because the wrong political fool out there lied to them. Trust me on that. Please, I mean, if you don't want to believe in it, then just take the precautions because it's the right thing to do. We all wash our hands because we don't want to get sick or the flu. We do things all across. We don't yell fire in a theater because we don't want someone to get trampled. There are just things that are common sense, because we are all human, and it is time we brought our humanity back to our government and started doing what's right for the people instead of what's right for parties or what's right for profits, or what's right for these political games. And we all, our media, all the way down to our voters, need to say enough is enough. Let's do what's right for the people.
Anyway, Rachel, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Rachel Ventura, thanks so much for your time, and we'll have you on again sometime down the road. It really is, you know, I'm really happy that we have you on.
Thank you, Rob, so much.